The African Union says it is facing some resistance from some members who feel it should delay the planned deployment of troops to Burundi. CCTV's Grim Chala has more.
The African Union Peace and Security Council's proposal to send 5,000 military, police and other personnel to Burundi to protect the civilian population from escalating violence has apparently not gone down well with the government in Bujumbura and several other African countries. The African Union insists it's forging ahead with the deployments of all the same.
This work has started some time ago, and normally we are going to finalize it with the East African Force itself and the UN.
According to the AU, the continent has the resource to deploy in Burundi and is appealing for cooperation from members for the mission to succeed.
I think African countries, in their own way, should be able to supply the requirements. Some may supply troops, some may supply medical personnel, others might supply police officers. So that capacity is potentially there. It's a question of now harnessing it for a given mission.
In the meantime, though, the AU has to contend with resistance from some quarters. Tanzania and Sudan have voiced concern over the deployment. Sudanese State Minister of Defense Yahya Mohammed says though Sudan is not happy with AU's plan on Burundi, it will still contribute military observers and civilians to the mission.
Sudan has remained committed to all African peace and security activities, and already it has announced that it will avail 120 military observers and civilians in all components to be a part of the East Africa Force within the ESF framework.
During the Assembly of the Union in Addis Ababa, scheduled for the end of January, officials at the AU find themselves hard-pressed to come out with a concrete plan to support the push for deployment of troops to Burundi. It will also provide face-to-face forum with President Pierre Nkurunziza or his top aide, perhaps to explain their position to the planned deployment. Grumtala CCTV at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa.
Meanwhile, testimonies of gang rapes and mass graves in Burundi are being documented by the United Nations, its human rights agency said on Friday in Geneva. They warned that an ethnic dimension of the violence in the country was now emerging. Western powers and African states feared the crisis could spiral into renewed ethnic conflict. Rupert Colville, spokesman of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, said during the searches, police, army and Imbonerakure militia forces could have arrested many young men who were later tortured, killed or taken to unknown destinations.
The attacks on 3 military camps on the 11th of December and the large-scale human rights violations that occurred in their immediate aftermath appear to have triggered new and extremely disturbing patterns of violations. We have, for example, documented 13 cases of sexual violence against women, which began during the search and arrest operations that took place after the December events in neighborhoods perceived as supportive of the opposition. The pattern was similar in all cases. Security forces allegedly entered the victims' houses, separated the women from their families and raped them, and in some cases gang raped them.
Is the UN admitting that it's unable to deal with the situation in Burundi, and what are the options? UN correspondent Liling Tan has the answers from New York.
This wasn't so much the UN admitting it can't cope with the Burundi conflict. Instead, it's more of an assessment that if conditions spiral out of control, it could lead to a level of violence that goes beyond the UN's ability to protect civilians. It's saying that without a political solution and without support from other countries, UN peacekeeping capabilities would be very limited. Now, there are growing concerns here that Burundi may be dangerously close to a return to civil war and even genocide. UN peacekeeping chief Hervé Latsus presented here 3 possible options in that leaked memo obtained by the Reuters news agency. One possibility is to send in as many as 4 battalions and 2 police units from the mission in neighboring DRC. The second option is a deployment of up to 10,000 troops. The third option is a combination of both. Now, some experts say UN peacekeepers would be ill-equipped to deal with a scenario involving an intense ethnic conflict and large-scale violence. The United Nations peacekeeping force, after all, is not an army. It does not go to war, and it answers to the group of 15 member nations that make up the Security Council, and therefore it has limited options, which is why many here at the UN are also looking to the African Union, which has said it's prepared to send a force of 5,000 peacekeepers for civilian protection. However, Burundi's government has bristled at that suggestion. The real solution may be a political one, and the Security Council, as well as the Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon, have repeatedly pressed Burundi's government for a political process. The Security Council has also scheduled a visit to Bujumbura next week. The goal? To meet with the government to seek a peaceful end to the conflict and show the country that the international community is watching closely. Li Lingtan, CCTV, New York.